Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So, remember back when David Davis was the minister in charge of our Brexit negotiations and he tried to go to the wrong country to carry them out? Well, it seems that we may be spared a little embarrassment in that direction for the pretense at negotiations to come, as some of them are going to take place in London. Even Boris Johnson's ministers should be able to find their way there. But before we get onto that, if you'd like to see more of my videos, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, once the UK formally leaves the EU, despite effectively remaining inside its structures due to the transition period, we will be classed as a third country for the purposes of trade and other negotiations. As such, these negotiations will not just be taking place in the EU places of power, but in the UK as well. And it's been reported that the first talks could take place in the Cabinet Office, with Michel Barnier again heading up the team for the EU. Now, it's not certain who would lead the team for the UK. I discussed recently how the loss of the department for exiting the EU, in other words, the Brexit department, means that multiple departments are all going to be involved with no single department coordinating the whole thing, which, to my mind, is a recipe for utter chaos with too many cooks spoiling the broth. But that being said, there is a rumour that Michael Gove will have overall ministerial responsibility for these talks. It would make sense. I know that's not normally a sentence you would use, it making sense that you let Michael Gove do anything, but in this particular context, it does make sense as he doesn't really have a department of his own to manage. His brief is formally the Chancellor to the Duchy of Lancaster, but that role exists only to arrange funding for the Crown. It doesn't require policy decisions really. And given that you wouldn't actually trust Gove himself to manage the finances for the sovereign, that actually gives him a lot of free time to be, in effect, minister without portfolio. So I would certainly expect Gove, particularly as he's one of the architects of Brexit, to be opening these talks with Barnier sometime in the first quarter of 2020. It wouldn't even make a difference whether we're in the transition period or not, whether we've left on a hard Brexit term, because we still need those talks to take place. Now, there will be an initial round of talks to simply set out the arrangements for the negotiations themselves before the actual negotiations begin. That's supposed to take place in early February. Let's see if Gove turns out to be any brighter than Davis when it comes to these negotiations. Quite frankly, if he at least takes some notes and manages not to dribble down his shirt as the realities are explained to him, that will at least be an improvement. And although the negotiations themselves won't begin until about March, we will have a glimpse of the line that the EU will be taking before then. So if you recall, the US published their negotiating position for the US-UK trade deal back in February 2019. Still easy to find online. Well, in February 2020, the EU will likely be publishing theirs. Now, I have to remind people of this because living in the UK, you might be forgiving for thinking that such things are top secret and you can't possibly know these things. But it's only the UK's Conservative governments that stop people knowing what they're trying to do. The rest of the world is more than happy to share things with people, as well as anyone else who's interested. These sorts of things are not top secret. And although there will be 11 months to secure a comprehensive deal, or bare bones deal, quite frankly, if we're going to be charitable enough to believe that Johnson wants one, the general deal would need to be arranged in terms of general structure much sooner than that. So in June 2020, there's going to be a meeting of the EU leaders to discuss, amongst other things, whether or not the bare bones deal is going to be possible by the end of 2020. So remember that the comprehensive deal that Boris Johnson is promising is pie in the sky. Simply not possible with what Johnson says he wants to achieve. I mean, for example, the UK is already talking about tariffs. But tariffs take years to negotiate. Even between just two countries, they take years because there are so many commodities to discuss. But in the case of the EU, you've got lots of countries and they're all going to be jostling for what's best for them in terms of these tariffs. It's endless. It takes absolutely years. We're going to be leaving the European arrest warrant scheme, so there has to be something in place to replace that. fishing rights. I mean, Brexiteers made a big play of denying fishing rights to other EU nations, even though the actual UK fishing industry never wanted such a policy, knows how dangerous it is. So if the conclusion in June is that no real progress has been made, and because at that point it should just be flashing out the details, the conclusion will have to be that a hard Brexit is going to happen at the end of the year, and preparations will be made for that. Except in the UK, of course, where Johnson will keep claiming that he will absolutely pull out a blinding deal at the 11th hour when the EU backs down. But in the world of reality, that is the point at which the UK should be seeking an extension to the transition period if we were at all serious about avoiding a no-deal Brexit. We won't, of course, so it will actually represent the point at which we can say that any Conservative MPs, and indeed any MPs from any party, still backing Boris Johnson's Brexit at this point, are selling out their own country to the disaster capitalists. We'll have 6 months' notice of the hard Brexit, 6 months to put pressure on MPs to do something to change course. It will be interesting to see what happens then. So, although 2020 will be just as big a Brexit year as 2019 was, there are at least some key times that we know in advance something's going to happen. 2019, we sort of knew about the March date, but apart from that, it was essentially winging it with no idea what was going to be coming next or at what time. So January, we'll see the EU agree its negotiating position. The UK doesn't have one, so don't hold your breath there. February, we'll see initial talks on the format of the talks. So yes, there will be talks about having talks. Bureaucracy is fun. March, we'll see negotiations actually begin, and then we'll see if Gopher Gove has any idea what he's doing. Then we're likely to see a spiral of despair following with the EU summit in June, deciding on whether or not there's going to be any sort of deal feasible by the end of 2020. I suspect I know the answer to that. So then what we'll have is a few weeks of accusations being traded in Westminster, hopefully with a decent Labour leader, but we will see, before MPs all sod off for summer again, yet again with the country in crisis. And then, well, what happens after that sort of very much depends on the public mood and what pressure may be levelled on the less crazy Conservative MPs. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. Until next time, I'll see you later.